Okay, so shalom everyone. We finished Parakshit Tet. We are on that for many months. Uh, Now this parak is still within the realm of Hasidus, but it's going to be focusing on a different angle. But we're going to be, firstly, it's also much shorter. We're going to be finishing the parak next week. This week and next week are going to be our 2 weeks doing this parak. But it's not going to be discussing the previous parak. All of Yatet was all the parameters and all the details of what is Hasidus and Cheshbonos, and this is going to be about kind of how do you recognize whether, and this is important, even though, just to take a step back for a second, we've spoken about how even though the Mesilat Yesharim goes in order of hierarchy of midos and midos that are more and more difficult for a person to attain. The goal, of course, throughout life is to grow chayil and acquire these things. But at the same time, not everything here is necessarily yet relevant and as practical in terms of our daily cheshbonos that we're making. What we're going to see tonight, even though it might not necessarily be as relevant within Hasidus, it is something that comes up very often. And what we're going to be learning about is kind of about thinking about is a decision I'm making, is it beneficial or detrimental to my religiosity? We have decisions like this all the time in life. It could be sports where a coach is going to say, if I take this player, I put this player in, is that going to help the team or is that going to hurt the team? He might be a better defenseman, but worse on offense, right? Ellie appreciates that much, I hope. And all these types of cheshbonos and calculations that we make daily, just to bring it to the level of practicality. So let's say I was just listening to a Shiur tonight on making early Shabbos. So from my Rabbi, Rav Simon, and he was saying this. I'm just gonna take something factual that he said, and then I'm just gonna make up some scenario. So factually, what he said is he prefers never to make early Shabbos. If it was up to him, he would make Shabbos at 8:30 throughout the entire summer, meaning regular Zman. And if it was up to his wife, it would always be early. So what they do in the Simon family is their pshara, their compromise is up until Shavuos. They make Shabbos Bizman. From Shavuos on, I guess until things get earlier, they make early Shabbos. But imagine this scenario. Let's say they didn't have that discussion. They didn't have this Shalom Bayis compromise. So let's say my Rebbe let's say he would feel, I want to make late Shabbos because I'm able to maximize my learning, my Avos Hashem Sitting Days Medrash. And right, those are very holy thoughts. But what's happening on the flip side? The flip side is his kids are going crazy. His kids can't have a Shabbos meal. His wife is like doing like tons of stuff like late into the night when it's not really Shabbos, but the kids want to be up for Shabbos, right? And even though a person could have a very like holy thought of, I want to sit and learn Friday afternoon, late into the afternoon or into the early evening. It's a nice thing, but look what you're compromising. So here we're going to see within Hasidus about those types of thoughts, and in terms of what the Yetzer Hara does to combat us constantly in Avos Hashem, and recognize, of course, when we're discussing Yetzer Hara here, we're talking about the Yetzer Hara combating a person who has pretty much eradicated a Yetzer Hara for sinning. Meaning this person who's in the realm of Hasidus is a person who overall doesn't sin, and any sin is by accident, and the person's going, Hasidus is all about being above and beyond and making sure you're so careful with everything you're doing. So let's see as well. Let's see what with that introduction, with the time we have left. What he says. So now we have to discuss is the balancing. Let me see something. Okay. Yes, the weighing, the balancing of Hasidus. This is something that is so essential, extremely important. This is something that's very hard, right? To know if you're going to take on. I'm just going to change the word chasidus, let's say, for chumrah. I'm going to add a chumrah. Is adding a chumrah a good thing or a bad thing, right? So typically, right, I want to be more machmir. It sounds great, but at what cost? Ki dakruso Rav, he says that there's many subtleties involved. And the Yetzer Hara is going to be able to have an opening to get you. The Yetzer Hara is going to try its best to get you to sin, to get you to make the wrong calculation. That there's a real serious threat from the Yetzer Hara at you. He harbe dvarim tovim. Because there are many things that are really good, the Yetzer Hara is going to tell you, no, these are bad. And the Yetzer Hara, there are going to be many sins. The Yetzer Hara is going to say, oh, go for it. There's a huge mitzvah, right? It tries to totally confuse us. He gives one of the examples here. He says, let's say you have a person who, let's say typically they eat healthy, and they exercise, they might play sports, and the Yetzer Hara comes to them. The Yetzer Hara says, think about the previous, before we did Chasidus for a few months, we were learning about Precious, right? Separating from the physical world. So the Yetzer Hara comes to you and says, you should be more from. You should separate yourselves. You shouldn't be involved in sports and exercising and running. I have time to run. Go sit in the basement. If you're eating, don't eat healthy. Don't eat at all. Fast. Right? And because of that, you're going to end up being weaker and not going to be able to serve Hashem as properly as you can. And obviously, your body might deteriorate and you probably won't live as long as you could have. So that's just an example. The Yetzer Hara coming and telling you to be more from and to focus on certain avenues that are really false and really not good for you to focus on. It says about MS. Shalo yuchal ish. He says, in order for a person to succeed in making sure that their mind, their mentality of Hasidus, and the way they think about Vos Hashem in general, like I said, is just a very important thing related to Vos Hashem, that think about the following three areas, and basically, hopefully, you won't mess up if you focus on these three. Number one, that your heart is straight. Meaning you're not you must possess a most pure heart, right? You want to make sure that you have proper intentions, and every single thing should be pure and holy in terms of your life. Next, the fun of Yisparach. This below zulas zakla. Okay. This is actually, there's all still within one. Your heart should be yashar, which means that your motivation should be solely for the sake of Hashem and not for anything else. I want to give pleasure to Hashem. If you start off with step one of I want to serve Hashem, I have a pure motivation, so that's a very important step. Second is that you examine carefully the actions that you're going to do. Think about what you're going to do. Make sure that you're going to perform this mitzvah properly, and that you should be performing this mitzvah, things like that. Next, the second is to rely upon Hashem. Have emunah, as it's explained here, have emunah that Hashem is going to help you, assuming all the components are there. I mean, assuming you want to serve Hashem, you don't have ulterior motives, and you just want to do a mitzvah, you want to do the right thing, then an important component is the recognition that you need Hashem's help. A lot of times, right, just to use another sports mashal, right, if you have a player that is so cocky that even though they're very good, and they want to win the game, right? It's like they have good motivations, right? And they want to do its best, and they're very skilled, right? You have all this, but they don't rely on their coach. and they think they know better. They think, I could do this on my own. I don't need the rest of the team. I'll take on a 2-on-1, a 3-on-1, right? So that person is not going to succeed, right? You have to rely on whether it's other players or a coach. Here in our case, of course, you have to rely on Hashem. You have to recognize that Hashem is able to help you and have that faith in Hakadosh Baruch Hu. As it says in Tehillim, Asher Adam Oz Lo V'Gomer, that in Tehillim Pedal Pasuk Vav, that a person's strength should be with you. Strength here is referring to bitachon, and Lo Yimna Tov La'Holchem B'Tamim. Hashem won't prevent anyone, like anyone who Hashem basically going to like good happen to someone who wants to, who's tam, someone who walks properly and is pure-hearted with Hashem. But he says, if any of these things are lacking, lo yagiel shleimus, the karov hudli kashel v'lipo, and you have not achieved this shleimus, then you're bound to fall. And I actually want to. There was an interesting footnote here that I'll share with you a very, very random note. Happens to be I was actually bought this sefer. This is a copy that I've been using. I bought this. Someone purchased to me as a present. And this is what I've been teaching from the entire time that we've been learning for over a year now. And a number of months ago, when I moved here in December, the movers, I'm almost positive there is a box that never came, because there are a number of Sfarim of mine that are missing. There'll be like a 3-volume set, and I'll be missing 1 volume from this and 1 volume from that. And my Mesilat Yesharim is somewhere in there. So I've been borrowing the schools, and because of that, I can't write in it. So I have no notes. And usually I used to be able to like mark which footnotes I liked, which ones I want to make sure to go to, and certain things like that. So that was just a random note. But I tell it to you because there's something I skipped over that I want to say that I remember now, which is that he brings up something very interesting, that when it comes to messing up and calculations, that it's much more difficult within Hasidus specifically, because Hasidus is basically going lifnei mishra sadin, it's going above and beyond. And there's nothing, it's not like following Shulchan Aruch, meaning it's not, oh, I should do this because of the Shulchan Aruch says. It's things where we don't necessarily have a rule book for it to gauge whether this is good or whether this will detract from another area of Avodas Hashem. And that's why it's so much easier for the heart to come and try to get you to mess up, because you can't necessarily rely upon it. This is good for you. Look, it says it here. So it's not necessarily true, not necessarily the case. Back to what we were saying over here now, that if a person is lacking in any of these areas, you're going to come to mess up and fall. And falling here is not just, oh, you won't be a chassid, but you'll actually sin. So it's not just, oh, I won't fulfill this chumrah, but I'll actually end up committing an avera or many averas. The hainu, if your kavan, if your intention is not pure, or your calculations is you're negligent in really properly scrutinizing the areas that the mitzvahs that you perform and the things you want to work on. Or you're not relying on Hashem, not asking Hashem for help, as I mentioned, I believe in last week's share. Rabbi said when it comes to mitzvahs, you have to perform the mitzvah, you have to serve Hashem, you also have to daven for hatzlacha. It was a learning part, that was the case. You have to put in the effort in learning, and you have to daven to Hashem to succeed in learning. You go hand in hand. So kasha lo shalo yipol. It's almost going to be impossible to not mess up, to not slip, if one of these areas are going to be flimsy. But if you are strong in these areas, then you should have a confidence that things are going to be okay. Hashem's not gonna make you stumble. That which Chana said in her nevuah in Shmuel Aleph Parak Beis Pasuk Tet, Ragalei Chasidav Yishmar. Hashem protects the footsteps of the Hasidim. David Mochin Amar David in Tilim Periklam Zayin Pasuk Chet says Lo Yazov Es Chasidav Leolam Nishmaro. Hashem is never going to abandon, and Hashem will always guard the Hasidim. So we see over here that a person should have confidence, right? As a teacher. So if I have a student, sometimes students are very anxious, right? Certainly before a test. So if I speak to them, I will say, look, you took notes, you paid attention, and you studied hard. That's it. If you do those three, you're paying attention. Ellie's a teacher too, right? You have a kid that pays attention, that takes notes, and that studies, have the confidence that you're going to do fine. Don't worry about it. Hine, Masha Tzarach Lahavin, who Ki ein ladun divrei chasidus amarin harishon, that he says that what one needs to recognize is that that when it comes to ideas of areas of chasidus, it's not necessarily how it always first appears. Meaning, he's discussing now the concept of whether to assess whether something is good for you to take on or bad for you to take on. So he says it's not always how it will appear at face value. But he says you need to you have to examine, look carefully at look at the far-reaching ramifications and outcomes that this will lead. Because there are many times where an action could seem good, right? So the example I gave, right? Let's stay late, let's learn late into the afternoon, early evening on Friday. But Fisha told us Rose, but the outcome could be bad, right? There's something else that's being compromised and that's suffering in terms of the family and shalom bias and the kids going crazy and all that stuff, right? So it's chayav l'nicha. Person then has to stop and say, you know, I can't continue to do this because other things that are being detracted. Because you don't want to be a sinner, right? Your goal is not to be a sinner, your goal is to be a chassid. And so you have to make sure that what you're doing is really proper. And sometimes at first glance, things might seem good, but you have to really think it through carefully. Right, and sometimes, of course, it's important to ask a Rabbi to speak to someone for guidance about whether you should do something or not do something. I remember hearing on like multiple occasions from my Rabbi in Israel, where like certain things that he took on, and certain things that maybe he's careful or certain times in life not to take on. One of the examples, like these are mamish areas of Hasidus. So one is like, remember, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think he took upon not having meat during the week. So that's special for Shabbos. Another thing is always daven vasikin. Right? Those are pretty intense things. I imagine waking up right now at 4:30, 4:45, 5 o'clock, whatever it is in the morning to daven every single day. I think you have to do vasikin. So it's a very intense thing. So to ask a Rebbe, am I ready for this? Is this going to help my Hashem, or is this I'm going to be tired all day and fall asleep during morning seder, and I'm not going to be able to learn? The person has to really, really weigh it out and think about it. Hine, Maise Gedalia ben Achikam Golei Nenu Shabnei Rov Chasidus. Let me hold it. So. So we have, when it comes to Gedalia, so we have the fast Tzom Gedalia. Gedalia ben Achikam was the leader of the Jewish people. After the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, there were still a remnant of Jews in Israel, and Gedalia was their leader. And the king of Ammon, he sent this person, he convinced basically one of the Jews named Yishmael ben Saniah to kill Gedalia. And Gedalia was warned in advance about this guy. And obviously, imagine if you find out, this person going to kill you. So you're going to take some precautions, right? You're going to make sure you're far away from that guy, hire a bodyguard, whatever you're going to do. So Gedalia was a big tzaddik, and so he's Shalom then Yishmael Kaf. He didn't say, Chas v'shalom, I should believe that Ishmael, this person, should do such a thing. He didn't want to be Makabal the Lashon Hara about him. Amar Yochanan ben Kareya. He said to Yochanan ben Kareya, Sheker ata dover Ishmael. He's the one who told him this information, and he said, "You're a liar. I don't believe you." And he didn't protect himself. Ma garam. What was the outcome? Garam shemesu v'nitzzeru Yisrael. The kava gachaltam hanishar. That Gedalia was murdered by Yishmael, and the Jewish people were dispersed into the Galus. Kvar yiches hakasav harigas anashim asher nergu elav kila haragam ku. Because of this, Chazal, in a certain sense, attributed the murders that Yishmael committed to Gedalia. It says in Gemara Nidan Daf Samach Aleph Umin Aleph Aleph Pasuk Eis Kol Pigre Anashim Asher Hika Biyad Gedaliahu, regarding the corpses of the people Sher Hika Biyad Gedaliahu, that Gedaliahu's struck down with his hand, even though Gedalia wasn't the person to do it. It was all Yishmael, and yet it was attributed to Gedalia because of him wanting to be a chassid in the sense of not being makabel this lashon hara, even though it's not considered lashon hara, right? You're allowed to take preventative measures for things like this. You want to go above and beyond, and it didn't fare well. That would be obviously it's an intense example, certainly a good example of a person has to really make proper cheshbonos. Another example, I want to save the next example for next week. So we're going to